Well, hello everybody and welcome. Thanks for watching. Today's topic is my very small and humble contribution to art history in Los Angeles. Uh, More specifically, East LA, and really zeroing in the history of self-help graphics in East LA. The old self-help graphics that you may have heard of and you may have seen before, that was on Brooklyn Avenue and Gage on the corner, which is now Cesar Chavez and Gage. And that building was there. Self-help graphics and Galeria Otra were there for many years. They've since relocated to a new place. My connection to them actually goes back, just for a small bit of history, personal history. My connection to them goes all the way back to my childhood. I grew up across the street on Brooklyn Avenue, across the street, and about halfway down the block from self-help graphics. When I was a kid, it was known as the CYO, and I used to play there, go there, and it's kind of like a boys club, a boys and girls club. And so I would go there, and me and my neighborhood friends, we would hang out there, we would play and whatnot. So I was very familiar with the building. As a matter of fact, just a quick trivia: if you've ever been to the old self-help graphics, upstairs they used to have a lot of dances up there. When I was a kid and I was growing up in East LA, that was a big place for dances. If you had a wedding in East LA, you probably had your dance in the hall upstairs. And the offices of self-help graphics and so on were where my friend Richard lived. So we used to play up there as kids. Now, then along came right around 19 late 70s, I don't know, 75 or so. Self-help graphics moved out of their first home and into that home there on Cesar Chavez, and they opened Galeria Otra vez. All right, so that was around the late 70s, and I began my career as an artist in the early 80s, and I was showing around LA, and I was starting to make a name for myself. I was in various shows and so on. At that time, I was associated, and self-help graphics was starting to make a name for themselves in the Los Angeles art scene, if you will. Uh, their claim to fame was being a printmaking studio, and also being a gallery that Chicano artists could come and show their work in. Because back then it was very, very difficult for Chicano artists to get their work shown anywhere, period, in LA. All right. It was difficult to get shown, in the big galleries or the name galleries, the commercial galleries. Certainly not on the West Side. You very, very rarely saw any Chicano artists on the West Side and out by the beaches and in the greater LA area. So self-help graphics was making a name for itself as being a place that Chicano artists could come and show their work. And at that point, they were exclusively showing Chicano artists. All right. So along comes me and an artist group that I was involved in. And it was like a loose artist collective where we would get together and sometimes put on shows together and work together and so on. So here I come with the idea of showing at self-help graphics. Now, at that time, Sister Karen Bocalero, I think was her last name, but everybody knew her as Sister Karen. Sister Karen was a curator, director, everything running the gallery and the atelier studio and so on. She was running the show. I came to her and I presented myself and presented the possibility of showing there at Self Help. Now she almost immediately shut me down. Why? Because they exclusively showed Chicano artists. I get it. We didn't have any other venues in Los Angeles where we could show practically. And so that was a place where, Chicano artists were able to get some wall space. So I get it. And how did I break that? What would you call it? A color barrier? How did I integrate self help graphics? Well, here's what I did. I talked to Sister Karen, and I made about, I guess you could say I had 4 points that she went along with. Number one was I told her I get it. I understand that Chicano artists have historically been shut out of the white art world. Heck, African American artists could barely get seen. It was pretty much a whites only world in the art world of LA. And so I told her, look, I understand. I get it. But when I came along, it was like 1988. And I said, I get it. For 10 years now, you've been showing exclusively Chicano artists, and it's been a wonderful, good thing for us. But at some point, the gallery space has to determine when does that exclusivity start to mirror the closed doors of the white art world that's not allowing anybody else to participate in. For 10 years, you've been showing us. And at some point, there has to be the step where you say, we've made our point. We've had our exclusive artists show exclusively on these walls. And at some point, you have to open up. Otherwise, you run the risk. You got to look in the mirror and ask yourself, are we doing the same thing that the white art world on the west side of LA is doing? So that was point number one. Point number two was I was able to pull out the locals card and say, this is also a little bit of the history that this place has with a person, an artist who grew up across the street. I'm a local, and I grew up playing in this building, and I have a deep historical connection to this place. And so it would be right that I come along and have my work shown in here and that these doors are open to me. Point number three was the new Los Angeles was starting to go beyond just being these segregated pockets of maybe like 3 main groups. You had whites, you had blacks, you had Chicanos in LA. But at that point, around the late 80s, we were starting to expand further and get larger and larger populations of other ethnic groups in the city. And so this was a time for Galeria, Otra and Self-Apps to open up and break and introduce other people to this gallery. And what do I mean by that, by those other people? Well, I was in that art group that I mentioned earlier. There were 5 of us. There were 2 of us that were Chicano. There was me from East LA. There was 1 Chicano from Orange County. There was 1 African American woman and 2 white artists. And so we were integrated. And I brought that proposition of now is time to integrate self-help graphics. Point number 4, maybe, is point number 1, because by the time we got to point number 4, none of this would have mattered if the art didn't hold up. And I presented the work to her. to see. And we were making very good art. And so the art itself was the final point that sold it to us, that sold us to Sister Karen to allow us to come in and show in the gallery. And there it was, 1988. We broke down the walls of Chicano only and came in and brought non-Chicano artists to the walls of self-help graphics for the first time. I was going through my archives and I was trying to find something to show you guys from that time period. What I did find was one of these cards that we had made for the show. This is actually my best friend in the group actually was Glenn Brooks, a super cool guy. And he was a wood block printer. And so he made this wood block print for the show. And as you can see, we showed May 8th through the 22nd. And it was symbolic because it was that person looking in. And it was, relatable to the history of self-help graphics, of Chicano artists looking on the outside, looking into the greater art world. And now it was those other Los Angeles artists looking into self-help graphics. So it made connections, and I really love this piece, woodblock art print. And here's the back, giving you info. You can see we showed in 1988 our names there: Glenn Brooks, Ron Carson, yours truly, Renee Michelle, and what was his name? Mario Antevers. Mario wasn't with us really very long. Actually, this was the only time he showed with us. For whatever reason, he only hung around with us for a couple of months and then he was gone. But he happened to have come in at this time and he was in this show. But there's our card. And there's my short story about my very small and, as I say, humble contribution to art history of Los Angeles. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Peace.